There was a time in my life when I kept adding more work, more goals, more responsibilities. I believed that the more I did, the more fulfilled I'd be. But I didn't realize that all the more was suffocating me. Every day felt like a race with no finish line, and despite all the effort, I still felt empty. One day, I paused. I looked closely at my life, and I asked myself, if I keep living like this, am I truly living? And from that moment, I started letting go. Letting go of what drained me. Letting go of comparison. Letting go of fear. Letting go of the constant need to do more. And you know what? It was in the letting go that I finally started to live. Today, I want to share with you 11 things I quit to live a simpler, lighter, and more meaningful life. 1. Overthinking. I used to live more in my head than in reality. There were days I couldn't get anything done. Not because I was lazy, but because I was thinking too much. Before starting anything, I felt the need to think it through thoroughly. I had to map out every possible risk. I kept asking myself, am I good enough? Is this the right time? What if I mess up? What if people laugh at me? I once spent months perfecting an idea, only to do nothing with it in the end. Not because I wasn't capable, but because I overanalyzed so much that I no longer believed in myself. I procrastinated. I hesitated. I drained myself completely, simply because I couldn't stop thinking, and I excused it with 2 words. I'm being careful. I used to believe the more I thought, the more I'd get things right. But the truth is, the more I thought, the less I dared to act. I became a prisoner of my own mind. I remember once, I had written something deeply personal, a heartfelt message I wanted to share online. My finger hovered over the post button, but then the thoughts came rushing in. Will anyone even care? What if this sounds stupid? Am I being too much? And so, I deleted it. No one saw it. No one knew. And I was left with that sinking feeling again. I should have just posted it. Then one day, I came across a quote that changed everything. Thinking doesn't bring clarity, action does. I stopped, and I looked at myself honestly. How long have I been thinking? And how little have I actually done? The answer was painful, because the more I thought, the more afraid I became. The more afraid I became, the more I paused. And the more I paused, the more I thought. It was a loop, a silent prison, a cage called perfection. So I tried something different. I acted even when it wasn't perfect. I started writing even if no one might read. I spoke up even when my voice trembled. And slowly I realized, the world doesn't need me to be perfect. It just needs me to be real. Real with my emotions. Real with my efforts. Real with myself. I'm not saying letting go of overthinking is easy. I'm just saying it's worth it. You'll never have absolute certainty. You'll never know exactly how everything will turn out. But you can know this. Every small step you take is still a step closer to who you're meant to become. Even shaky actions are stronger than thoughts trapped in your head. And if today you're feeling unsure, anxious, overwhelmed by your own thoughts, pause, take a deep breath, and begin. Start with something small. One tiny action is enough, because life doesn't truly begin until you step out of your head and into your life. 2. Focusing on what you can't control. I used to spend so much time and so much energy worrying about things that weren't even in my control. I wanted everyone to like me. I hoped people would approve of me, understand me, support me even when they barely knew who I truly was. I felt disappointed just because someone looked at me the wrong way, said something harsh, or simply didn't hit like on a post I had poured my heart into. And then I'd spiral into self-doubt. What did I do wrong? Should I change the way I speak, act, or present myself? Maybe I'm too much, or maybe I'm not enough. So I lived as a version of myself that was constantly bending, constantly shrinking, trying to fit into expectations that weren't even mine or clear to begin with. I also used to fear the future so much that I forgot how to be present. I would play out every worst-case scenario in my head. What if my job doesn't work out? What if I never become successful? What if no one believes in me? I convinced myself that over-preparing for everything that could go wrong would somehow keep me safe. But in reality, I wasn't getting stronger. I was just getting more exhausted. Then, one quiet evening, I asked myself a simple question. Out of everything I'm worrying about, how much is actually within my control? The answer was sobering, because almost everything that drained me was never mine to carry in the first place. I can't force someone to like me. I can't make someone understand my heart. I can't shape the future to fit my script. I can't change the whole world overnight. But I can change myself. I can choose my attitude. I can control how I respond. I can decide what I believe in and whether I will keep moving forward or let fear stop me. That was the beginning of a shift. I began reclaiming my power not by controlling others, but by no longer giving them the power to define me. I stopped letting their opinions shape my self-worth. Stopped letting likes or silence decide whether I deserve joy. Stopped letting criticism erase the effort and heart I had quietly poured into everything I did. I started focusing on the things I could control, no matter how small. A kind post I wrote with intention. A workout I completed even when I didn't feel like it. A gentle word to someone who needed it. A quiet act of discipline no one ever saw. And slowly, I started to return to myself. Not the version shaped by pressure or fear, but the one that felt steady and whole. I was no longer tethered to external responses. I was no longer haunted by a distant, imagined future. I began living here in this moment, the only place where I actually have the power to choose. So if today, you feel overwhelmed by things you can't control, let me remind you gently, you don't have to control everything. You only need to control yourself. And sometimes, that alone is enough to change your entire life. 3. Treating health as a secondary priority. There was a time when I treated my health as a choice instead of a priority. I used to say, I'm too busy, I'll work out another day. I'll rest after I finish everything. Let me just grab something quick to eat. I treated my body like a car that didn't need maintenance. I kept going and going until it started breaking down. Through exhaustion, body aches, insomnia, and sudden irritation for no reason. It wasn't until I was lying in a hospital bed that I finally realized, when you're healthy, you have hundreds of dreams. But when you're sick, you only have one to be healthy again. From that moment, I changed. I stopped waiting until I had free time to exercise. I made time for it. I stopped treating food like an afterthought. I began to see it as fuel for a long journey. I stopped overworking myself until burnout and started listening to my body before it collapsed. Now, I give myself at least 30 minutes of movement each day. It doesn't have to be intense. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just needs to be consistent. It just needs to be non-negotiable. Because I've come to understand, taking care of your health doesn't take away your time. It gives you more time to truly live. 4. Staying up late. Consistently. I used to believe that staying up late was a sign of dedication, that the later I worked, the more effort I was proving. I was even proud that I could stay up until 2 or 3 a.m. just to finish my tasks. But the next morning, I was a mess. My head pounded. My body felt drained. My mind, sluggish and dull. I had no patience left for anyone. I couldn't focus. Everything felt twice as hard, even though no one else could see it. Some days, I drank 2 or 3 cups of coffee just to keep myself functioning. But no amount of artificial energy could replace what my body really needed: a good night's sleep. And that's when it hit me. The best caffeine in the world doesn't come from a cup. It comes from a bed and 8 hours of deep rest. Since the day I began prioritizing sleep, things started to shift. I stopped staying up late just because I could. I learned to put my phone away earlier, to clear my mind before closing my eyes, and to treat rest as part of my discipline, not a reward I had to earn. because I now understand. A great day doesn't begin with a to-do list. It begins the night before, when you choose to give yourself the gift of rest.
5. Playing small, afraid to dream big. There was a time when I lived small, not because I didn't have dreams, but because I was afraid they were too big for someone like me. I was afraid to fail, afraid of being laughed at, afraid I wasn't good enough, wasn't qualified enough, wasn't even allowed to think beyond the comfort zone I had grown used to. Then one day, I came across a story about Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. Before Amazon existed, Jeff had a stable job in finance. He earned a high salary and had a clear path ahead of him. But inside, he carried a quiet dream: to build an online bookstore. Back then, almost no one believed in that dream. But Jeff asked himself a simple question using what he called the regret minimization framework. When I'm 80 years old, will I regret not doing this? And the answer was yes. So he took the leap, not because he was certain it would succeed, but because he didn't want to live with the weight of regret. We often think that dreaming big is a privilege reserved for the extraordinary. But the truth is, dreaming big is a right we all have, if we're willing to believe. So today, I want to ask you one gentle but powerful question. Are you living too small for who you were truly meant to become? And if you could look back at your life at the age of 80, would you regret not taking that chance? Not stepping out of your comfort zone? Then maybe, just maybe, today is the day you start. 6. Being surrounded by things that drain your energy. There were times I felt completely drained, and I couldn't understand why. I was sleeping well, eating properly. Nothing particularly stressful was going on. Yet inside, I felt like a battery slowly dying. That's when I started to pay closer attention. I noticed there were certain people who made me feel lighter just by talking to them. Certain places that gave me peace the moment I arrived. But also, certain conversations that left me feeling exhausted for no clear reason. Certain habits I kept repeating, and each time I did, I felt emptier. So I tried something simple. I took a blank sheet of paper and drew a line down the middle. On the left side, I wrote, "What gives me energy? People I feel safe and understood around. Work that brings me meaning. Activities that help me recharge. Spaces where I can be fully myself." On the right side, I wrote, "What drains my energy? Relationships that only bring tension. Habits that keep me stuck. Negative content I consume without even realizing it." And then I made a choice. To start reducing what was on the right. Not cutting everything all at once. Just a little less each day. Because your energy is your life, and it deserves to be protected. Save it for what truly matters. And be brave enough to let go of what leaves you feeling depleted, but gives you nothing in return. 7. Consuming more than creating. I used to believe that the more I learned, the more I read, the more I listened, the faster I'd grow. And I followed that belief to the letter. I read books every day. I listened to podcasts whenever I had a free moment. I watched insightful videos, studied the words of wiser people, took detailed notes. I consumed so much knowledge that my mind always felt full. But one day, something hit me. Despite everything I had learned, I was still standing still. I wasn't writing. I wasn't sharing. I wasn't creating. I wasn't applying what I knew. I was possessing knowledge, not living it. And that's when I understood something important. Consuming without action is just procrastination in a prettier disguise. It doesn't matter how much you know. If you don't use it to make something better, something meaningful, something real. From that moment on, I changed direction. I started writing down what I learned, but in my own words. I shared my experiences even when they came out clumsy. I began to create my own value, instead of only collecting the value created by others. You don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to ever become great. So if you've been learning endlessly, consuming endlessly, taking notes endlessly, and still feel a hollow emptiness inside. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, what did I create today? Because that's where growth begins. Not when you know more, but when you do something with what you already know. 8. Comparing yourself to others. I used to measure my worth using someone else's ruler. I watched people move faster than me, succeed earlier, speak more confidently. They had more support, more charisma. Their lives looked easier somehow. And then came the questions. Why am I still stuck here? Maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I wasn't born with the same talents. Every time I thought that, I shrank a little more. I stopped sharing, stopped trying, stopped believing in what I uniquely had to offer. Until one day, I realized something simple, something obvious in hindsight. I was comparing my behind the scenes to their carefully chosen highlight reel. I wasn't seeing the whole picture. I didn't see the sleepless nights, the doubts they whispered to themselves, the failures they didn't post about. I only saw the perfect photos, the uplifting captions, the shiny achievements. And I assumed that was all there was. From that moment on, I made a shift. I stopped comparing and started becoming curious. I asked, what did they do to get there? I listened. I learned. And I asked myself what small step I could take from their story. Curiosity breeds motivation. Comparison breeds shame. You don't need to be better than anyone else. You only need to be better than the person you were yesterday. 9. Fear of commitment, fear of constraints. I used to believe that freedom meant having no boundaries, no constraints of time, no responsibilities, no rigid schedules or frameworks, just open space, endless, undefined, where creativity could soar freely. I feared structure. I feared being locked into routines. I thought, if I'm boxed in, how could I possibly be inspired? But then, life changed. My daughter was born, and everything I thought I knew was turned upside down. Now I had to wake up early, drive her to school in the morning, pick her up in the evening. My work hours shrunk dramatically. I no longer had long, empty stretches of time. Gone were the late-night creative marathons. Gone was the ability to wait for inspiration. And strangely, I became more productive than I had ever been. Because time was limited, I was forced to prioritize. No more endless tinkering, no more chasing perfection. I focused. I did what truly mattered. And I did it with clarity. I'm reminded of a story about Ernest Hemingway. He was once challenged to write a touching story using only 6 words. And this is what he wrote. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Just 6 words. No tears on the page. But somehow, everyone who reads it feels a quiet ache in their chest. That's the power of constraint. It doesn't kill creativity, it distills it. It doesn't suppress expression, it sharpens it. Limits don't mean less. Sometimes they mean deeper. Because when we're forced to work inside the lines, we start discovering dimensions we never knew existed. And often, it's within the very boundaries we once feared that we meet the strongest, clearest version of ourselves.
10. The trap of busyness. There was a phase in my life when I constantly said, I'm just really busy. My calendar was full. My to-do list was endless. It felt like I barely had a moment to breathe. I thought I was being productive. I thought that constant motion meant I was moving forward. But day by day, I began to feel like I was just spinning in circles. I was doing more, but nothing meaningful was actually progressing. I was always rushing, but not getting any closer to the life I truly wanted. And then I came across a quote by Denzel Washington that stopped me in my tracks. Don't confuse movement with progress. You can run all day and get nowhere. That hit me. I started examining everything I was doing, every meeting, every task, every checkbox. And I began to ask myself, is this really moving me forward? Or am I just doing it to feel like I'm doing something? I realized busyness can give you the illusion of importance, but it's clarity, the ability to choose wisely, that gives your actions true meaning. From that day on, I began to subtract. I cut out things that seemed necessary, but added no real value. I learned to say no to meaningless meetings, to tasks that existed just to exist, to the noise that only filled my schedule but never filled my soul. Because here's what I've come to understand. It's not about doing more. It's about doing what matters. It's not about moving faster. It's about moving in the right direction. If you've been running non-stop, but still feel stuck, maybe it's time to pause, to reevaluate, to ask, am I truly progressing or just keeping myself busy? Because life doesn't reward how fast you run. It rewards the intention behind your steps. 11. Living in clutter, both physical and mental. There was a time in my life when everything just felt too much. Too many clothes, too many notes, too many apps on my phone, too many thoughts crowding my mind. I called it normal. But the truth is I was tired, and I didn't even realize it. Every morning, just picking an outfit distracted me. My phone buzzed non-stop. My workspace was a mess, killing any motivation before it even started. And in my head, a never-ending list of unfinished tasks waiting to overwhelm me before I even began. Until one day, I chose to do something simple. Simplify. I decluttered my closet, kept only the pieces I genuinely loved. I deleted the apps I didn't need, so my screen looked cleaner, and my mind could breathe. I reorganized my workspace, only the essentials stayed. And something amazing happened. As my surroundings became clearer, so did my mind. I could focus. I worked better. Most importantly, I felt lighter in my own life. Minimalism isn't about having less so you live with lack. It's about removing the excess so you can live with clarity, live with intention, live with authenticity. This change didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a quick fix. It was a long journey, one that began with something small, but consistent enough to make a real difference. And you don't have to do everything at once. Just begin with one thing, one item, one habit, one piece of mental clutter that's weighing you down. Be brave enough to put it down. And then you'll see that empty space? It's not as scary as it seems. Slowly, it'll be filled with things that feel lighter, clearer, more meaningful to you. Because living simply doesn't mean living with less. It means living with what's right, what aligns with your values, what reflects the life you truly want. And now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever let go of something and found your life became better because of it? Please share it in the comments. I'd truly love to learn from your story, and more importantly, to remind all of us that we're not alone on this journey. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone you care about. Because who knows, maybe this small message is exactly what someone out there needs today. See you in the next video. Let's continue this journey together, to live slower, clearer, and more authentically.